1 Kings 11 is a key dividing place here in the book, 11 and 12, because 11 is describing Solomon's sin. When he gets older, then he falls away from the Lord, builds idols for his wives, things like that. And so that brings about the transition that happens then in chapter 12 with the divided kingdom. So everything comes up to there. You know, there's certain chapters you want to remember in Kings. Certainly chapter 12 is a key place. If you look at all of 1st and 2nd Kings together as just one book, as we should, you would have everything looking great up until chapter 12. Boom, chapter 12, pivotal point. Now you have the downfall. We have the divided kingdom happening. Now we have the downfall from here. You have the temple built, and then everything falls down. And when you get to 2 Kings 25, there is no more nation. There's no more temple. Everything is gone. So you can see everything moving just like that. And this chapter 11 and 12 is a critical point. Thank you very much, Solomon, for ruining the whole kingdom. That's how you want to look at that. His sin reverberates all the way to the end of the nation, and creates the divided kingdom and all of that. So so we see this throughout, and as we mentioned, I think at the end of our last study 2 weeks ago, that I'm always just blown away that God comes and goes, all right, here's the deal, here's what I'm going to do, and all this, and Solomon doesn't repent. Solomon doesn't repent at all. He doesn't do anything. As a matter of fact, when he says he's going to raise up Jeroboam, as we're going to see, Solomon tries to kill Jeroboam. See, he's basically fighting against God. He's going to do things his way. He's become an entirely different person. His heart now is no longer the way it was before. So it's a great warning for us to learn that how easy this transition can be. All right, so very quickly we're going to move through some of this fairly rapidly. In verse 14, God now is going to raise up some adversaries against Solomon because of what he has done. The first one here is Hadad the Edomite, and Hadad is perfect for this because he hates Israel so badly, because when David and Joab fought against Edom, they killed every male in Edom, and it was Hadad and a few of them that were able to escape and go down into Egypt. So Hadad had stayed down there, and you see this. Verse 17, Hadad fled to Egypt together with certain Edomites of his father's servants. Hadad still being a child, they set out from Midian and came to Paran, and took men with them from Paran and came to Egypt, to Pharaoh king of Egypt, who gave him a house, assigned him allowance of food, and gave him land. And Hadad found great favor in the sight of Pharaoh. So he gave him in marriage the sister of his own wife, the sister of Tahpenes, the queen. So I always thought that was kind of interesting. Here he's finding favor in the sight of Pharaoh, but who did Solomon marry? You know, he had a wife from Pharaoh as well. So maybe that Pharaoh isn't liking Solomon too much anymore, and so Hadad then is protected by Pharaoh until Solomon dies, and then Hadad is just going to, when Hadad then goes back to become king, he will fight against him. All right, so you have him. You go down to verse 23. You also have Rezin, who fights against Hadadezer, who is the king of Syria, city of Zobah, etc. And he gathers men with him, becomes, verse 24, a leader of marauding band after the killing by David. Apparently David did some similar things there. And they went to Damascus and lived there and made him king in Damascus. And he was an adversary of Israel all the days of Solomon, doing harm as Hadad did. And he loathed Israel and reigned over Syria. So you got two guys who hate Israel like crazy, and they then give Solomon problems in the last years that Solomon's reigning because of Solomon's sin. And then the third person that he raises up is Jeroboam in verse 26. And one of the things that we'll remember here, that when he gets here to Jeroboam, he's going to say that he's going to give Jeroboam 10 tribes. Judah's going to get just one tribe in order to fulfill God's promise to David in 2 Samuel 7, and we saw that. All right, so now let's slow down a little bit, and we'll come over then a little bit more to what happens with Jeroboam. So we meet this prophet named Ahijah. You see that in 11:26. Jeroboam son of Nebat, an Ephraimite of Zeradah, a servant of Solomon, whose mother's name was Zeruiah, a widow, also lifted up his hand against the king. And this was the reason why he lifted up his hand against the king. Solomon built Millo and closed up the breach of the city of David his father. The man Jeroboam was very able, and when Solomon saw that the young man was industrious, he gave him charge over all the forced labor of the house of Joseph. But then verse 29, at that time when Jeroboam went outside Jerusalem, the prophet Ahijah, a Shilonite, found him on the road. Now Ahijah was dressed himself in a new garment, and the two of them were alone in the open country. And when Ahijah laid hold of the new garment that was on him, he tore it into 12 pieces, and he said, "Take for yourself 10 pieces, for thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, because I'm about to tear the kingdom away from the hand of Solomon, I will give you 10 tribes." All right. He's going to give him 10 tribes. And how many tribes does Rehoboam get? Yeah, Rehoboam gets 1 tribe. That's only 11 tribes. What's going on here? Pardon? Benjamin gets a little in that area. You know, if you got real technical, you'd probably say that David had 2.5 tribes. Who's the other? Pardon? No, Levi's God's tribe, so you don't count them as the 12. What tribe was absorbed into Judah? No? Can't hear you. You're saying something. What tribe was absorbed into Judah? Simeon. Thank you. Simeon was. All right. So you have Judah and Simeon, and when it's just Judah, Simeon's already just pretty well not much of a tribe. They were just part of the land of Judah. Why'd Simeon get such a bad deal? That's right. Yeah, Simeon and Levi were the ones had the incident with Dinah, and got a bad blessing from their father Jacob because of that. All right, so he gets these 10 tribes then, and there you are, Jeroboam, and the emphasis then that he makes indicates that what they have done. He explains what Israel has done, or actually what Solomon had done when all the nation had done. Verse 33, because they have forsaken me and worshipped Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of Moab, Milcom, the god of the Ammonites, and they have not walked in my ways, doing what is right in my sight, and keeping my commandments and rules, as David his father did. This is the biggie here, because David is the standard. Whether you're talking about the northern kings, the southern kings, David's always the standard. And the thing is, God continues to speak of David this way, and we always go, well, yeah, but wait a minute, look at all the bad things David did and all this. Yes, like anybody, David committed a lot of sins, and he committed some bad ones. But he was devoted to God. Always. He never lost his heart and devotion to God. And that's what God keeps looking at. It's a good lesson for us. Not that you're supposed to get away from sin, but it's a good lesson to remember all the way through here, what's God been emphasizing? Heart of David, the heart of David, and the lack of the heart that Solomon had. He lost that heart of desire and love for God. So very, very important principle that you keep seeing there in that. So David had kept God's commandments. He had done all of those things, and so he is lifted up as the standard for all the other kings. With that. Verse 34 through 36, you'll notice that God says he's going to keep his promise then with David, as we've mentioned. He says, nevertheless, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him ruler all of the days of his life. For the sake of David, my servant, whom I chose, who kept my commandments and my statutes, but I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand and will give it you, the 10 tribes. Yet to his son I will give one tribe, that David, my servant, may always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city where I have chosen to put my name. And I will take you, and you shall reign over all that your soul desires, and you shall be king over Israel. So all of those words were, this is the reason that Jeroboam then became an adversary to Solomon, is because of Ahijah. It may not even been his mind to do that until Ahijah comes and says, yeah, this is what we're going to do. We're going to give you the whole northern part of the kingdom, and you can reign over that, etc. Jeroboam had a great opportunity here, and God, I don't know, did God know he was going to be a ding-dong? I guess maybe, but he then becomes a real pain, and God's going to get him for it. So,
he has free will, which is the next sentence.
That's right.
You know, they didn't have to go into captivity. He had the choice to follow God.
That's right.
As everybody.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It is a matter of his own decision, and he had free will to do that. Very true. So notice God's emphasis to Jeroboam. I mean, this is a great promise. If you're Jeroboam, you ought to have been jumping up and down for joy. Verse 38, and if you will listen to all that I command you and will walk in my ways and do what is right in my eyes, by keeping my statutes and my commandments, as David my servant did, I'll be with you and will build you a sure house as I built for David, and I will give Israel to you. And Jeroboam let that go into one ear and out the other. All he could think of is, I got power now, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. It is hard for us to understand how these people can be that dumb. And God's like, okay, I'll kill you if that's what you want me to do. Kill you, kill your kids, kill every descendant you have. You will never have a descendant, Jeroboam. That's okay, that's what I'm going to do. Incredible. So, verse 39, God goes on to say, and I will afflict the offspring of David because of this, but not forever. That's a really important principle. Not forever. What? This is your Jeopardy question for the evening. What important phrase did God use over and over again to indicate this idea that I will punish the descendants of David, but not forever when they sin?
Remnant.
Well, there would be a remnant, but there's a phrase he used to describe why he would do that he would never withdraw his steadfast love. Exactly. He would never withdraw his steadfast love. You see that in Psalm 89. You see it in 2 Samuel chapter 7. We've seen that when we were studying 2 Samuel and Psalm 89 as well. God says, if his sons, if any of his sons or whatever commit sin, I will punish them, but I will never remove my steadfast love from the house of David. Meaning, I won't take away an opportunity for them to return. They can always come back to me. That steadfast love will never leave. That's a unilateral covenant that God makes. It's a covenant he made with Abraham. He follows up with David. Do you remember the phrase that Paul uses in a sermon in Acts the 13th chapter, where he says, when he's preaching, Paul preaching to the people, and he said, and if you come to Jesus, you will receive the sure mercies of David. Remember that? Sure mercies of David. What's the sure mercies of David? Same thing. It's that steadfast love that God promised David, that you will always, always can stay with me.
Seems to be part of the theme of the book. It's like, really, God? Like,
Yeah.
they're going to get really bad here.
Yeah.
Are you really going to keep that promise?
Are you going to keep that promise? And he will. Even if it gets down, as Adam said, to a remnant. Just a small portion that is left. Exactly. But he will always keep that, because obviously this is going to come through Christ, and Christ is going to be the ultimate fulfillment of the covenant that God has made in order to save the world. And that's what that's about. All right? Questions, comments? Okay. All right. So he emphasizes that, and then you see the conclusion of Solomon's reign in verse 40 through 43. You see Solomon sought therefore to kill Jeroboam, but Jeroboam arose and fled to Egypt. So the Egyptian Pharaoh seems to be fine with supporting anybody who doesn't like Solomon anymore. So he flees to Egypt, to Shishak, king of Egypt, and was in Egypt until the death of Solomon. I wrote in my margin, I said, hey, Solomon, you're fighting against God. He told you this was happening. You didn't repent. You didn't plead with him. You didn't anything. You just deciding to go into battle against God now and try to kill the guy that he chose. I can't even believe how far off he's gone. In the 20 years since we, saw him building the temple and all of that, those last 20 years, he is shot. You don't even recognize him. Really, really, really amazing. Great warning for all of us. Verse 41, now the rest of the acts of Solomon, all that he did, and his wisdom, are they not written in the book of the acts of Solomon? Everybody got that book? Everybody got that book? No, I don't guess we have that book. There's a lot of these little books that you're going to see mentioned in Kings, and you're going to go, man, I'd like to read that book. And God says, nah, didn't feel like that was necessary. Verse 42, and the time that Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over Israel, all Israel, was 40 years. So the United Kingdom lasted how long? 120 years. Each king reigns 40 years. Saul, David, and Solomon all reigned 40 years. I would imagine by the time you got to Solomon, you're going to go, well, I'm going to die next year. My 40 is up. That seems to be the way this is planned out. So verse 43, and Solomon slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David his father, and Rehoboam his son reigned in his place. That ought to remind us of something. Even the greatest of the greatest is still human and will still die, and pass it on to somebody else. And when we get to Ecclesiastes in the summer, where we're going to see that principle that is laid out, same principle. The power is vanity. It will come and go, and it will not be there forever. All right, closing comments or remarks on chapter 11. Questions, anything? Okay. Chapter 12. Now we come, before I do that, got to ask this question. End of the United Kingdom, starting the divided kingdom, approximately what date? Got to know this. What date? It's a little off. Yeah, somewhere around 930. Something like that. Most I read will say 931 to 933, something, like 20 years off, but I'll take it. At least you were in the same century, huh?
Do we think there's any significance in the length of the United Kingdom versus the length of the divided kingdom?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Now you think about this. You bring that up. Beginning of the divided kingdom, somewhere 931 to 933. When does the northern kingdom of Israel go extinct? When do they get destroyed? 722, 200 years later. So they're going to last 200 years, and every king is going to be bad, and Assyria will take them away in 722 BC. So that's going to be into that, and then in 722, then beginning there, you'll just have Judah only, and Judah will last until 605 BC. So they're going to last another 115, 16 years or something like that.
I will say it surprised me how considerably shorter for the number of kings the divided kingdom lasted, because it's maybe 340-ish years that the divided kingdom lasted in Judah at least, and so compared to 120, it is longer, yes, but they also had 20 something kings.
Oh man. Yeah, northern kingdom have 1 billion kings.
When I think about it, I think about it in terms of the kings themselves and their reign and their stories, and it's sort of evenly divided almost in your mind. But David Solomon was a fourth of the time frame
Right.
that the kingdom was together.
Yeah.
So.
But when you think of the northern kingdom, you think of the number of kings that were in the northern kingdom. You got to have a screw loose to want to be a northern kingdom king, because they would sometimes they'd last a week and they'd get killed. So you did not want to be a northern kingdom king. They came and went just like crazy. So true. So anyway, there you get a little flavor of where we're going here. And remember, at the end of Kings, in 2 Kings 25, you're going to be at 605 BC. So you can see how much territory is being covered here. We're starting in 931 here just in chapter 12, and those 300 years are going to go by the time you get to end of Kings. All right. So I mentioned a minute ago key chapters. Chapter 12, key chapter, divided kingdom. 2 Kings 17, key chapter. Israel goes into captivity. 2 Kings 25, key chapter. Judah goes into captivity. So 1 Kings 12, 2 Kings 17, 2 Kings 25, and the nation is done. They're gone. They're all in captivity. So they're right back where they started from. God brought them out of captivity of Egypt, brought them to the promised land. They disobeyed, and just like Garden of Eden, they're thrown out of the land, and they're right back into the bondage that God had brought them out of before. Just the epitome of brilliance. There you are, mankind. Okay? Very good. All right, come chapter 12. Well, quick lessons from Solomon's reign. I think we've talked about most of these. Obviously, God was the only reason for his wisdom and prosperity, and without God, Solomon became nothing. Solomon's downfall takes less than 20 years. How easily that happened, how easily to slip. The danger of influence and the danger of idols is evident during Solomon's reign. And then the question always has to be, where is our heart? Because bottom line is, when there's a spiritual problem, there's only one answer. It's in the heart. That's where it is. So when we think of what happened to them, it's their heart. That's what happened. They let their heart get invaded by other things and did not keep their heart filled with God. It is all about that. And there's nobody who knows your heart better than you. Be honest about it. Be honest where your heart is. Don't let it slip. All fight that. Every one of us. So be careful. Always be careful. Okay? All right, so now we come to Rehoboam, reign of Rehoboam, and first thing, of course, that happens is that Rehoboam then becomes king, and so the northern kingdom comes, and in verse 4, they say to Rehoboam, "Your father made our yoke heavy, now therefore lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke on us, and we will serve you." And he said to them, "Go away for 3 days, then come again to me." So the people went away. I got to ask him, you think Solomon is really just really abusive to the northern kingdom here? Is that the feel you get during Solomon's reign? I don't get that feel. Yes, Solomon, did a lot of things, but he didn't take his citizens and make them slaves or something like that. He was just like any other king. He's, got a lot of stuff going, and he's got people working for him and doing things. But to suggest this kind of cracks me up. Reminds me of our country. You couldn't have a wealthier country in the whole world, and don't turn the news on, because all you'll hear about is, we're being oppressed. You're like, huh? Well, my goodness, you poor college students, you're just like, I can't believe this. We're all dying. At any rate, just kind of interesting that this is their complaint.
It does kind of ring back to 1 Samuel 8 a little bit, though. Samuel's warning
True.
for the kings.
True.
They're going to take, and you're going to regret this.
Right.
And they seem to have, whatever degree it's to, they seem to regret it.
Yeah, and it's just, the thing, it's just a little bit of a rub for me, only because, and I agree with you, but only because, like in 1 Kings 4, verse 20, verse 25, all the days of Solomon, everybody's living under the vine, under their fig tree, and there's peace, and there's happiness, and everybody's just super duper great, and then as soon as he dies, they're going, You're like, but anyway, bottom line is, reasonable request, fine. How are you going to handle that, Rehoboam? Go ahead.
Building projects that
He did. He did. And he used slaves for that, but he would have, hey, if you got your own people overseeing some of these things, are you getting paid? Or are you getting, I don't know. I'm sure there were plenty of jobs in those days. But what'd you say? Yeah, and that seems to be what they're complaining about, is the taxation is high. That wouldn't surprise any of us. That seems to be the most fun that leaders have, is to have taxes. So yeah, you would definitely have that. So here's that counsel. Yeah.
I would just add that pendulum swings from generation to generation. It seems like human nature is you always want what you don't have.
Yeah.
So the lesson for me when I read this, it has been repeated over and over, and will be probably until eternity, and that is that there's no kingdom on earth that will ever satisfy mankind.
Good.
I don't care how good it is. It will never satisfy. You always want more, or you want something different.
Right.
And that's just human nature.
Very good.
The lesson for me is it's no different today.
No different. Yeah. Very true. Very true. Every generation comes up. We did when we came up. Every generation complains about the other generation. That's exactly right. Okay, so anyway, he tells them to go away for 3 days. Verse 6, then King Rehoboam took counsel with the old men who had stood before Solomon his father while he was yet alive, saying, how do you advise me to answer this? And of course they say, he'll be a servant to the people today and serve them, speak good words to them. They'll be your servants forever. Well, that's a pretty wise statement there. But he abandoned the counsel that the old men gave him and took counsel with the young men who had grown up with him and stood before him. And he said to them, what do you advise that we answer this people who have said to me, lighten the yoke that your father put me forth? And of course, they say just the opposite, just make it even harder than it was before. So here is what Second Chronicles, by the way, says about this particular incident. Of course, he caves in to the counsel of the young men. And here's what Second Chronicles says. But Jeroboam, son of Nebat, a servant of Solomon, son of David, rose up and rebelled against his Lord. Then worthless and wicked men gathered around him to resist Rehoboam, son of Solomon. When Rehoboam was young, inexperienced, and unable to assert himself against them. I thought that was an interesting statement. That fits, by the way, with how Chronicles will give even some of the kings of Judah that weren't great, give them a little benefit of the doubt. Well, you know, he was young and inexperienced. How old was he when he became king? How old was Rehoboam? I think we just read it, didn't we? What? Nice baby you got there, Britt. He was 41. Every time I think of him being 41, I think, 41? That's young and inexperienced? It's not like he's 20. 41? Well, his mother was an Ammonite, and his father was not really great. So there you have that. Anyway, so that's interesting there from 2 Chronicles 13. I want you to look at the pronouns that are used in verse 6 and verse 9. What contrast do you see? Yeah. When he talks to the young men, he uses we. What are we going to do? When he talks to the old men, he doesn't suggest that. He doesn't seem to have a connection with them. So these are the young men that he'd grown up with. Hey, we can all see that they're friends, and they're young and dumb, and so he doesn't listen to the old men, and it happens just as you would think. So I asked this question already. Verse 15 tells us that, of course, the Jeroboam and all the people of the north decide, forget it, we're not going to follow you. So the king did not listen to the people, for it was a turn of affairs brought about by the Lord, that he might fulfill his word, which the Lord spoke by Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam, son of Nebat. So we see God is the one who's behind this. He's moving this. We don't know exactly how he did that, but obviously he's using the inexperience and foolishness of Rehoboam to bring about exactly what he wants to happen here. So kingdom is going to divide, they depart, civil war is averted. I think it is interesting to look at verse 18. This shows again how dumb Rehoboam is in this. Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was taskmaster over the forced labor, and all Israel stoned him to death with stones. And King Rehoboam hurried to mount his chariot to flee to Jerusalem. So Rehoboam, you don't have a real good feel, you don't have your finger on the pulse here of how these people are feeling. You decide to send a guy to go collect taxes or whatever, and they just stone you to death. And so then Rehoboam is like, whoa, I need to get out of here. And then you go down again. And you see in verse 21, when Rehoboam came to Jerusalem, he assembled all the house of Israel and tribe of Benjamin, 180,000 chosen warriors, and he's going to go out and fight them. Hey, Rehoboam, you still don't get it. You're in a panic now, trying to save your kingdom, and you are not going to save your kingdom. And so that's when God intercedes, and he goes, you're not going to do this. And whoa, and behold, somebody listens to God. Okay, we won't do that. And so they avert then a civil war at that time. We already mentioned that, what that illustrates about Rehoboam, and then Rehoboam panics and tries to go to battle, and it's not going to work. All right, chapter 12 and verse 25 and following, we get a picture of Jeroboam's foolishness then. You see Jeroboam, verse 25, he built Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim and lived there, and he went out from there and built Penuel. And Jeroboam said in his heart, now the kingdom will turn back to the house of David. Now what did he say? There's that heart word again. Goodness, Jerry, could you not listen to God? What does it matter? So here's the heart. In his heart, he says, no, I'm going to lose them all. God was over this. And so instead of letting them go back, verse 28, so the king did what? He took counsel. He didn't listen to God. He takes counsel. And he's going to follow that counsel. He makes 2 calves of gold, and he said to the people, you have gone up to Jerusalem long enough. Behold your gods, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Have you heard that phrase before? Yeah. It was back at Sinai, wasn't it? When Moses was on the mountain. It's exactly the same words. Just here we have. This is why it's important to know history. Otherwise you're going to repeat it.
It's almost like they knew it and they did it anyway.
I know. It's crazy. All right, and then verse 29, and he set one in Bethel and the other in Dan. Dan is the extreme north of the country. Bethel is all the way down almost to Jerusalem. So he puts calves in those 2 places. You can probably conclude the location, why that location is important here. He does that so the people like, well, why would I go all the way to Jerusalem? I can just worship here.
It's sad that's in Bethel too, because that's a place where
Yes.
God has appeared to
I was
Jacob.
just going to ask that question. That's right. Bethel, Dan and Bethel, other than location, Bethel is where Jacob, remember, what does the word Bethel mean? House of God. Okay? The EL, by the way, is always God. So, house of God. And so Bethel was a well-known place. Dan, they had established that during the days of the judges when Dan wanted more territory, and he bought his own priest and went up there and killed everybody in that area and then set that up. But anyway, he set up now idolatry in north and in the south. You will notice in verse 31, he also made temples on high places, appointed priests from among all the people who were not of the Levites. So these are direct violations of what God said not to do. You shall not worship on the high places. Deuteronomy chapter 12. God goes into great detail. You shall not worship on those high places. He makes high places. And then he appoints priests that are not from Levites. In fact, you learn over in Chronicles that he just appoints priests to anybody who wants to be one. You want to be a priest? Okay, you can be a priest. So he just violates everything there with that. Verse 28, just mentioned that. They compare that to Exodus 32, verse 4. Priests who were not from Levi. Take a look in 2 Chronicles chapter 11. The interesting parallel as the Chronicles mention this. 2 Chronicles chapter 11. And take a look beginning of verse 13. And the priests and the Levites who were in all Israel presented themselves to him, that would be to Rehoboam, from all places where they lived. For the Levites left their common lands and their holdings and came to Judah and Jerusalem because Jeroboam and his sons cast them out from serving as priests to the Lord. And he appointed his own priests for the high places and for the goat idols and for the calves that he had made. And those who set their hearts to seek the Lord God of Israel came after them from all the tribes of Israel to Jerusalem to sacrifice the Lord, the God of their fathers. They strengthened the kingdom of Judah, and for 3 years they made Rehoboam, son of Solomon, secure, for they walked for 3 years in the way of David and Solomon. So that's a little known thing that Kings doesn't tell us, that all of these priests and Levites then who loved the Lord came and left Israel, came down, and actually gave strength to Rehoboam and kept them seemingly on the right track for at least 3 years. so you have that. Yeah, long time, exactly.
So that speaks to like how quickly the moral rotten in Israel. There's no more teachers.
That's right.
Of the law anymore.
That's right.
It's all abandoned.
Good. Very good point. Remember, who's supposed to be teaching Israel? Levites and priests. Now who's teaching Israel? Did anybody teach Israel? They've all left. So it's no wonder they all go off the deep end. Yeah, I'm like,
I was thinking about when it's a sort of a retelling of this Exodus story of the Mount Sinai golden calf, but then it doubles it. Not only is there one golden calf, now there's two.
Yeah.
Not only is there one place that was sacred that is now profane, now there's two.
now there's two.
And it's sort of like, it goes back to these sort of like central stories that are like begin in the very beginning of Genesis and then are sort of retold with different characters and different
Yeah.
viewpoints.
Yeah. It really is kind of funny how these things just start mirroring the same thing. And of course, Isaiah is going to talk about that. Hosea is going to talk about that, how the people have gone from captivity to captivity again. And it's all about a new Exodus. And of course, the New Testament tells us that we are part of a new Exodus. That's what Isaiah is doing. Yeah.
I think also we see in Jeroboam's story the ripple effects of sin. Like he built these high places and then they weren't destroyed until the days of Josiah, like almost at the very end of the nation.
That's right.
And even when we see some faithful kings that destroyed idols, they didn't destroy the high
Destroy.
places.
Yeah.
And so this one act, like, it impacted all of human
Yeah.
history.
That's right. That should be a reminder to us that all of us have a lot of power and influence, especially with those who are close around, especially with our children. And a poor decision by us can lead to greater poor decisions by children, which are greater poor decisions, and it just dominoes to pretty soon if you could come back to life and look at your great-great-grandchildren, you'd say, what happened? What happened? Well, that one thing you decided to do that was a compromise. Don't compromise.
You know, I think it's something that happens over and over. Jeroboam was afraid that their hearts would turn to God.
Yeah.
Every powerful country kind of fears Christianity because they fear what the influence of ungodly heart.
Yeah.
Because it will spread and they can't control.
Yeah, and if you want to be evil and rule in an evil way, Christians are the last thing you need hanging around. That's right. It's so true. That's why China and Russia and Canadian prime ministers and other places hate Christians. Yeah, and a great group of people in our country. It's very, very true. So anyway, this happens. It struck me too. What's the response of the people? Okay. Yeah, that blows my mind. I will never forget. Very quickly, when I was in San Diego, talking to a preacher of another church about the things they were doing they were taking the church astray. And I was trying to get him to understand how dangerous it was, and he wouldn't see it. And I said, well, let's just suppose. He said, well, the elders think it's edifying, so we go along with it because that's what the elders think we ought to do. I said, so if someday the elders decided to put instrumental music in the worship, would you do that? And he goes, well, I don't. He says, that's not going to ever happen. Now, mind you, I'm 31 years old, and I said, you got to be kidding me. It'll never happen. It's going to happen. There's no doubt it's going to happen. But it was that whole thing of, well, if the elders think it's edifying. I have known so many Christians to shrug their shoulders at something that is definitely wrong. Well, you know, the elders. Elders what? Nobody has a right to disobey God. You can't just go, well, the elders. It's the when you have to stand up. Great, thank you.